Welcome to Meet the Boss TV. I'm Anna Gilligan. In this week's sponsor focus, Chris Botker explains how IVCI's conferencing solutions can bring your business together and help its bottom line. IVCI and Polycom have teamed up to make video conferencing equipment systems easily attainable and cost-effective for many Fortune 500 companies. The days of doing business locally are long gone, but communication doesn't have to suffer. I spoke with IVCI's Senior Vice President of Managed Services about the business benefits of video conferencing and telepresence solutions. Chris, as there's been this move towards cloud computing, how has that affected the implementation and use of visual communications?
It's interesting from a cloud perspective, and maybe we need to subcategorize cloud communication or visual communication a little bit, because a lot of things have come from the cloud traditionally. Everything that we do from a communication perspective generally comes from the cloud. So your cell phone, your TV at home, even the internet, even social networking, all that stuff comes from the cloud. So what we're seeing now is really the business video conferencing piece moving into that cloud space as well. Now, it's something we've done for a long time already as IVCI, but we're seeing that really transform the way that customers can really adopt and then be able to scale their video conferencing services.
How has the cloud changed business?
If you look with regards to what's big on IT managers and CIOs' plate, it's how can I scale this? How can I do this cost effectively? And a lot of things enterprises themselves can't do very well themselves. And a fundamental reason is if I'm an insurance company, my business in insurance is not necessarily running video conferencing or telepresence services. And I think what you're seeing, and a lot of analysts such as Gartner and some of those have proven that as well, what you're seeing is by moving to the cloud, I can get a lower cost, a better total cost of ownership, and I can scale it easier.
What do you think are the next steps for the cloud? What's in the future that we haven't seen yet?
You know what? I think a lot of it is in intelligence. So it's the intelligence to do things that you have to do today, maybe at the endpoint, that you can then physically do in the cloud. And I'll give you a good example. We all know what are some of the biggest flaws with the iPad is it doesn't play Flash. So, but why should it?
Because you want to watch a video.
Right, but why should the iPad itself have that intelligence? Why doesn't the cloud take care of that? So why doesn't the cloud say, I recognize what you require as an endpoint, and I will deliver that to you based on what the endpoint can actually handle? It's a little bit similar for us in the video conferencing side. So we've had our own B2B exchange now for, again, nearly a decade. Now, again, B2B exchange, you might say, well, that's a relatively new term for video. I've only heard about that for the last year or so. And there's specific reasons why you've only heard about that for the last year or so. The fact is we can connect to any system that's actually out there. It might mean I have to have a different method of connecting into them. We know that. Some of it can be automated. Some of it has to be manual. And the experience and the people and the process know how to deliver that so that the technology can actually work end to end.
The communication solutions sector is a rapidly growing industry that's increasingly competitive. So I asked Chris how he turns this competition into opportunity.
So managed services are very much an overused term, just generally, let alone inside of the video space, but just generally. And what most people get when they buy a managed service from a video or telepresence perspective is they get heartbeat on the equipment and heartbeat on the infrastructure. What we do is we manage through the infrastructure and manage the actual meeting. It's the meeting that's the application. So in our arena, there aren't actually that many organizations like us that can really do that whole turnkey, from designing and building the actual physical room itself, whether it's an AV integrated room or telepresence or regular HD video, all the way through to maintaining and supporting that room, as well as managing the meetings for those customers. So you tend to find that
So you're like a mediator in their meetings?
Can be to the so some customers it's fully automated. So in terms of it's automated in their minds. In terms of that they schedule the rooms, they walk into the rooms, they get on with the meeting, they see everybody that's local physically and everybody that's remote they see on the screens, just like a regular meeting.
Right.
Some customers want in what we would call concierge services, where they want us to, which I think is where you're going, to actually mediate the meeting to an extent of, we regularly do on a weekly basis with one of our customers. We'll run 50 site meetings, sometimes twice a day. Those have to be coordinated. So we're physically in that meeting looking at the participants and making the meeting happen where the technology often can't help you.
Do you find that as more companies are trying to cut costs that they're turning to telepresence to manage their employees?
So I would say yes. If you look at the amount of immersive type telepresence systems that have been sold over the last probably 2 years, that has pretty much skyrocketed. From a quantity and volume perspective, it still doesn't compare to regular HD type video systems. You're selling those each quarter in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
But how effective can you really be managing people from a screen? I mean, isn't there something to be said for being in person?
So you can't replace the in-person experience. And what I always say is it's the times in between that are critical, absolutely critical. So if if you meet somebody in person or you have employees that work for you, you need to meet them in person, but then to keep engaged with them over video, you get the same effect. I'm a great example of that. I've been living remotely now for 9 years. I manage many teams across the whole country. I will go into the office, into the headquarters every second or third week, but not all my team are there. Most of them are, but others are spread around throughout the country. Without video, I simply couldn't do my job because you need to understand whether your people are getting it. And on the phone and on conference calls, we've all been on conference calls. What's the nice thing about being on an audio conference call? So I can do other work. So how many times have we been on a conference call whereby we ask a question and there's silence? Right. Oh, I was on mute. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question again? So now as an executive, if you do it yourself, and I've never met an executive that doesn't admit that they're doing other work on audio calls, then you have to assume that your whole organization is doing the exact same thing. How much time are you wasting where people aren't paying attention to the meeting, and as a result, the decisions don't get made? So in my office, I have a large display that's only 4 or 5 feet away from me. So when I talk to any of my team members, or even when I talk to customers, they appear to be sitting for me across the table. That's big because now I can read their reactions. I can see what they're actually doing. So we deliver that service, and it can either be done in an automated way that we're not in there, or we can do it where we can actually triage the actual meeting as well.
So we've spoken about what makes IVCI unique. Mm-hmm. What makes video in the cloud, the service, unique?
So there are things that you can do in the cloud that you can't do at an enterprise level very cost effectively. Simple little things like redundancy, failover, those sort of things. They're typically not cost effective for an enterprise to actually build themselves. The other things is that you can get a better reach. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, we have our own B2B exchange, and we're also interconnected to other B2B exchanges. It wouldn't be cost effective for an enterprise to build their own B2B exchange. If you imagine every single enterprise trying to do that, it's like you don't do that in any other form of communications. You connect to the cloud and let the cloud connect you to everywhere else.
So how do you give your clients a competitive advantage?
I'll give you an example. A large healthcare insurance company that we've had actually now coming up to 8 years as well. I remember back in 2002 being in front of the CIO, and the CIO made a very clear statement to me. In fact, he made 2 statements. One is what their business objectives were, what they were going down the road of, and that was value to them, which was mergers and acquisitions. And the other one was every meeting that he had been that was video, he had a 1 in 2 failure. What he also understood and made very clear to us is when I'm acquiring something, I don't know what I'm acquiring. I don't know the network contracts that they have. I don't know if they have any equipment or anything like that. When I have a service like you have, I sign along the dotted line, and then within a short amount of time, I have video communication services at that location, irrespective of me having to do anything. If you look how that company grew when we started, they were a mere $16 billion company. Today, they're a $65 billion company. So,
and do they credit it to what you've done for them?
The CEO, the whole executive team uses this on a daily basis. Video on its own isn't going to turn everything around. So you can't make a statement, oh, just because they use video. Right. What it's done is it's enabled them to execute on their strategies in a very effective and productive way. And that's the key. I just gave an example earlier on where we regularly do 50 site meetings for them, for their executive leadership team. If they weren't happy or comfortable, they wouldn't do that. And also, this particular organization, traditionally, in past years, come November, they put in a travel freeze. This year, they moved that to September. So again, it's showing you that they're comfortable enough that they know they have an alternative. So now they can make certain decisions that's just purely on the bottom line, that they need to affect the bottom line, but they're giving their users an alternative because their leadership team, sees the value, and as a result, they've become more productive and effective.
Do you have another success story you could share, maybe in a different industry?
Sure. We have a global company in 86 countries. I can't use the name, but everybody knows who they are. And what we've done with them for about 3 years is their business units are geographically split up in their financial reporting. So we overlay the gross margin contribution that each geographical region makes. We overlay that on their absolute usage and their net increase in usage against each region. For 3 years and 12 quarters in a row, the numbers have matched, i.e. those regions that were the most productive, or those regions that had the highest gross margin, the biggest profit for the organization, were also the ones that had the highest usage of video and the absolute net biggest increase quarter over quarter in video. Now, again, to your previous question, do they attribute that just to video? No, not necessarily, but what they're realizing is it's an absolutely business-critical tool for them, and it's enabling to execute on their strategy. So if they didn't have that tool in their toolbox, they know they wouldn't be as productive and effective, because they're getting all that time back as well that they previously used to spend traveling. And a lot of the regions like Latin America and Africa, it's not easy or cost effective to travel like it potentially is for us here in the US or maybe even in Europe.
You've mentioned it a few times that the meeting rooms are really important. What are the components that make it a great environment for telepresence, visual communications?
You said earlier on when you witnessed this telepresence meeting, you said, wow, that just looks like they're in this room. Well, that's because the whole room has been designed around that, at this end, at the other ends, and everything else. So you have a fundamental endpoint technology experience. Forget about what you then put into the cloud. You have to start with the endpoint. If the endpoint can't do it, then it doesn't matter how good the cloud is, it can't change that experience. What a lot of organizations sometimes make a mistake in is they just think, I need to buy any old endpoint and put it in any old room. So they'll put a 42-inch screen in a room that's 30 foot by 20 foot long and expect the person sitting 30 feet away to actually be able to see another room full of people on a 40-inch screen. It isn't going to work. The problem then is what you get is if users have a bad experience, they'll walk away. They won't do it again. So there are factors that are involved, and a lot of our companies don't understand that, which is why they often come to us and sort of say, okay, well, help us understand what it is that we need to do in order to get the right experience in the right room at the right time.
So how has IVCI and Polycom enabled your clients to collaborate?
So we've had a long relationship and partnership with Polycom, and many of the products that they have really fit well in terms of from a collaboration perspective. So we talked maybe a little bit earlier on with regards to the effect that they have in the cloud and the infrastructure that we have in the cloud and how that applies to a service provider like us. But it's also important, I also mentioned earlier, the importance of you have to have the right system at the whatever level it is. So what Polycom has is great systems all the way from the desktop, physically on the desktop, to what I call executive desktops. So these are really appliances. You know, some people don't like to have the screen inside of their spreadsheets and on that. And again, I'm one of those. So and part of the reason is human nature. So when I'm having a video call with you, I want to make sure that you're looking at me, which means if we're sharing content and we're on an executive desktop, the moment that I say, well, let's look at that spreadsheet, then you would look across and look at your other screen to actually physically look at that spreadsheet, just like you would do if you're presenting in a room. When it's built into your desktop, then sometimes you get that again. You're now reading something, and to me, you're staring at me because you're actually not physically focusing on me. Right. So, but a lot of people, that's a big segment. So the executive desktop gives you at your desktop that great ability to then be able to segregate those two. You can still have them integrated as well if you want to, but have that appliance like that you can manage and that you can control, and that's very, very effective. So Polycom has a phenomenal solution in that. And then if you look at then all the different HD systems that Polycom has that then go into the room, you know, you get a lot of choice. So again, every meeting room is different. They're different sizes, different layouts. Some will require certain types of systems versus others. So you need to have a partner that has the flexibility of different types of products in the range to make them suitable to the particular type of environment, and then also to make them suitable to the experience that you want to get out of that. So now you move that up into the immersive telepresence side. Even there's choice. So there's the drop the telepresence system into an existing room and have the telepresence systems in essence just on their own with a table, and they have different flavors in that, or have the immersive experience whereby you're putting a room inside of a room. So now everything is controlled, the lighting is controlled, the ceiling is controlled, and what I like about it is different users want a different type of experience, and if you can't offer choice, then it's going to be hard. So if you mix that together with also one of the things that Polycom, we talked earlier about innovation, that's actually very important. It's important for their customers. It's even more important for service providers like us. Is what they call their HD Ultimate experience, whereby they can basically run an HD call at half the bandwidth. So you imagine for a service provider like us having many systems, that's a massive impact, because people often assume, wrongly so, that bandwidth is free. It's not. And while it might be free on the LAN, or apparently free on the LAN, it's certainly not free in the wide area. Absolutely not free. And one of the challenges is that people don't know how to calculate it. So one of the things is when people get asked, why should I have an IVCI managed service including network when I already have my own network and it's already there and it's free? And my answer would always be, well, that's like me driving on the road outside and saying, for me to drive on the road outside, it's free just because it's there. No, it's not free. I'm just not smart enough to be able to calculate the gas tax, my town tax and my federal tax. I can't calculate what portion of that is actually attributed to the road that I'm now driving on. So that's why you need to talk to finance people and say, look, just because you can't calculate it and just because it's there doesn't mean it's free. So the HD Ultimate experience that Polycom have, where it uses half the bandwidth for an HD call, is huge, because it goes on to some of the things that we talked about earlier. A managed service provider allows you to be able to scale much more easily. If you now do that at half the bandwidth, it now makes it twice as attractive to scale more easily, because not everywhere, and again, it's a conflict between what we have at home and in the office. So I'll go home and your cable provider or something is giving you many megabits down to your house and back again. But you go to your office, you're sharing that with many people, and you won't have the same type of performance in your office that you would have at home unless you architect it that way. And you're seeing the colliding of everything coming together. So the networks are obviously going to get better. Of course they are. They're going to be more video aware. Of course they are. But if you add on solutions that Polycom have, like I've just explained, and you tie it with solutions that IVCI does from a managed service perspective, you can then scale it much better, more effectively, and get a better total cost of ownership.
For more fantastic interviews directly related to your business, be sure to explore Meet the Boss TV.